Creativity comes in when you go, we don't have the time we thought we needed. We don't have the team. We don't have the budget. We don't have all of the resources that we would really like in order to get this done, but we still have to get it done. That's when you have to start getting creative.
Hello and welcome to the Keynote Curators Podcast. I'm Seth Deckman, your Keynote Curator. In our podcast, we dive into ideas and strategies that help bring unforgettable experiences to life. Today, we're talking about the power of creativity. Our guest, Kyle Scheele, is known as the patron saint of crazy ideas. Kyle, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how's it going?
It's good. It's going good. Thanks. So to our audience, thanks for joining us today. If you want to spark new ideas in your business and make a difference, stay tuned. By the end of this episode, you'll learn how to spark creativity even when you have constraints, how to build culture of empathy by valuing those around you, and how the power of one person can make a lasting impact on the world. We're excited you're here. So let's just get this candle lit and get this fire started. How can we use limitations to spark innovation by thinking inside the box?
Yeah, so I think that thinking outside the box is something that people say about creative thinkers all the time, or about creative ideas. They'll go, oh, that's such an outside the box idea, or that's such an outside the box thinker. And as an artist and a creative, I always push back on that and go, no, the box is a vital part of the creative process. Like the example I always give is thinking outside the box is really easy. Thinking outside the box is when your boss says, hey, we need to get this done in the next 6 weeks. And you say, what if we got it done in the next 6 months, right? That's an outside the box solution. What if we never got it done at all and you just kept paying me? Like that, it's easy to go, what if we had no constraints at all? Or what if we had all the budget in the world? Well, then you wouldn't need creativity. Creativity comes in when you go, we don't have the time we thought we needed. We don't have the team. We don't have the budget. We don't have all of the resources that we would really like in order to get this done, but we still have to get it done. That's when you have to start getting creative. And so I think that part of creative thinking is embracing the constraints and saying, how do we work within these while also letting them shape the work, but not letting them completely dictate what is possible for us?
Yeah, I love that. You know, the constraints, having lived overseas for nearly 30 years and coming back to the States and just realizing the abundance of resources we have, we're often feel unconstrained. And, you know, it can be the other side of the coin where it actually limits you because you just keep reaching for more and more and more. But what you're saying is when you have these constraints, when you're limited with resources and time, that is almost like a pressure cooker, like when diamonds need pressure to be created, that can be the source or the context by which creativity there can be an impulse behind it, you know, that fire started behind it.
Absolutely. And I think that oftentimes we don't realize that being in a resource-rich environment is actually not particularly beneficial to creativity. Because the thing is, if you have a huge budget and a huge team and all the time in the world, you will just keep throwing those things at a problem, even when it's clear that that's not working. And we see this all the time in companies that have lots of resources. You see that most of the big, gigantic, like companies that have been around for a long time, they are not the ones driving innovation because they don't really know how. They just know how to keep throwing money and time and people at a problem, even when it's not working. And what happens is when all of a sudden the tide shifts, or you've got a newcomer to the marketplace who doesn't have all of those things, that person has to go, how do we solve this problem without all of that stuff? And oftentimes they find a more efficient way, or a faster way, or a more creative way, or a way that solves that problem in a way that's, you know, cheaper for the marketplace or more appealing to the demographic that you're trying to reach or whatever. And that solution came out of, we don't have the resources.
Yeah, it's a great point. And, you know, Kyle, it makes me, I want to move on to the next topic here, but I'll just finish this off. Having lived overseas and mostly in South America, I had lived in Venezuela in the 90s. Baseball is a very popular sport. And I had the good fortune of being able to adventure over to Cuba. And, you know, it's no secret that a lot of the players in the major leagues that are incredibly successful not only are Cubans, Dominicans, Puerto Ricans that come from, let's say, less resource-rich environments. So the question begets where it's like, okay, you have children growing up in North America, Canada, where they have a ton of baseballs, a ton of bats, the fields are manicured, there's lights, there's always parking for the parents, you have a safe place to put your bicycle. You go to Cuba, you get a half of a broomstick, you get a baseball that's made with rubber bands that have more dirt on it than any mud kickball game in the world. And there's no lights on the street, and they're playing it at dark under one bulb. And by the time they get to the major leagues, there's a baseball. It looks like a grapefruit. It's clean and white and pristine. And there's a beautiful Louisville slugger that looks like a sequoia tree. Of course, they're unconstrained, they're lit, but they developed inside the box. And I just love that phrase, because it's like one aspect of reverse engineering, kind of,
Yeah.
deal with.
Well, and I think if you can thrive in an environment like that, then yeah, once you get to then the major leagues are going to feel like T-ball for you, because you can see what you're doing. You've got people cheering you on. You've got all the stuff that you didn't have before. But I think it's in that pressure cooker environment of not having what you wanted. That's where you develop the resilience and the skills in order to that enabled you to thrive down the road.
Yeah, totally. So there's a common myth about creativity, and how can leaders inspire everyone to be creative and think like innovators?
Well, I think one of the myths about creativity that's very common, and maybe this is the one you're talking about, is that, well, some people are creative and then some people aren't. You've got your artists and your designers, and maybe we'll even lump marketers and things like that in there. And then there's the rest of us that have to kind of do just the boring, not creative work. And it's a ridiculous belief, but what is the thing about our brains is we don't really care if a belief is true or not. Your brain is not particularly concerned with if something is true or not true. Your brain just goes, what's the belief that we decided on? I will go to work defending that. And so when you decide I'm not creative, your brain will look for evidence that you're not creative. And when an idea begins to come up, it'll go, no, shut that down. Remember, we're trying to defend this belief. And so what you have to do is start changing that belief so that your brain can justify the new belief, which is actually everyone's creative. And every act is creative. When there's no difference between making a sculpture or making a business plan, or there's no difference between creating a work of art or getting a team to collaborate on something. Those are both creative acts. And we have to start acknowledging that and stop saying, well, this one counts and that one doesn't. And when you do open that up, then you start to see, oh, all of these people have creative powers. They just have them in different areas. So this one might be a traditional artistic person who can design our marketing materials and come up with creative slogans and all that. And this person might be able to be creative in the way that we do fundraising and in the way that we manage our capital. And this person might be creative in how do we bring talent into the organization. And we should value all of those people so that we're not just getting creative ideas out of this one small subset, but we're enabling everyone to be a participant in the creative process.
Yeah, I feel like you're preaching to the preacher, even in sales, where it's not viewed as a creative industry. Yes, you mentioned marketing and branding and maybe there's design and stuff, but the act of selling, not only is there's a predisposition and a judgment against it, but I always tell my team, I feel like I'm in a workshop. I might not have the carpenter's smock on or apron on and the tools, but I'm in there creating and really doing things from nothing. So when I say you're preaching to the preacher, you're speaking to me, but that's true for surgeons. It's true for lawyers. I mean, even bond lawyers, it requires creativity to find your way out of some situations that are, that aren't conventional.
Yeah.
I want to take this a little bit further. I just want to thank our subscribers for coming back. For those first timers, thank you for joining us. Leave a comment. Share with us where you're constrained in your creativity or not constrained in your creativity, where constraints have been able to be a source for creativity, where you're limited and you've been able to find a way out from where you are and you've thought inside the box. Our audience, are meeting professionals, but also business owners, Kyle. And what I know that from the dozens of keynotes that you give every year, and it's incredible to think sometimes you've gotten close to 100 keynotes a year, is how how can event professionals use bold ideas to create memorable experiences?
Well, I think that event planners are a perfect example of what we're talking about. I think the average person would not say, "Oh, no, oh, an event planner is a creative profession," but it absolutely is, because you have to constantly be reinventing. What does this event feel like, and how do we make sure that people who loved this event 5 years ago keep coming back? And also, how do we get new people who maybe have never heard of this event? You see a lot of times where an event is very prestigious for 10, 15, 20 years, and then it fails to reach the next generation. And then all of those people retire and they move on, and the event or the organization falls apart. And so, as an event planner, you constantly have to be figuring out, how do we retain the people that are our core audience, and how do we expand that and reach the next generation? How do we figure out how to bridge the gaps between both of those people? That is a creative act. And some of that's going to be brainstorming within your team. Some of that's going to be going to other events and seeing what's working, staying on top of industry trends, and then getting references that are outside of your particular bubble. Sometimes it's
Right.
easy to say, I'm going to go to 5 other events that are exactly like mine, instead of saying, you know what, when I'm at my event, I'm going to walk down the hall in the convention center and see a smaller event that's going on, and I'm going to see a bigger event, and I'm going to see if I can sneak into a friend's meeting of just 20 people at their office. And all of those things classify as events. I'm going to go to a big church service. I'm going to go to a Taylor Swift concert and say, what can I steal from all of these places to make, what are they doing really well and what are they doing poorly? And how can we ask those same questions about our own events and take all of that stuff, stir it up together, and make something that solves all the problems that we're trying to solve?
Yeah, you must be channeling me, because it is borrowing. I was thinking of Taylor Swift or the Sphere, but even go to an agricultural fair or your local Kiwanis Carnival. There might be diamonds in the rough. There might be gems that you can borrow just a piece from and then build upon it. What I want to underscore is that, for event professionals, you had said they're a perfect example. And where you went was capturing or continuing to maintain an audience, that something worked 5 years ago might not work 5 years down the road or even today. And when we're talking about creativity or constraints and thinking inside the box, you didn't immediately go to, let's go find an illusionist or a juggler or somebody who does something a little bit odd from a TV show or something like that. You went to the audience and the experience and how to leverage that and how to capture people's attention. Even food and beverage, budgeting, hotel reservations, ground transportation require creativity. You've been to it. How many events have you done this year alone, Kyle?
I'll do 70 events this year. Yeah. And I've done
you'll
most
do
of them
70
because it's
events.
November right now. Yeah.
And maybe a large portion of them where you go and get the credential, the badge, or the name tag that hangs on the lanyard have kind of been the same. But there's been a few. There you go. I've got a bucket of them over here. But a few of them, I was at an event recently where they did it at the airport. Others, it was on the app. So you could choose. You could do the traditional one, or when you check in for a flight at the gate, you can show your QR code. Those are things that came from inside the box that are providing a different experience. And it's not like we're going to go hire, the biggest rock and roll band in the world or a famous comedian or something like that. So my point is that there's often creativity options, possibilities, opportunities in areas that aren't conventional.
Yeah, I think this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that if you have a budget to throw, $250,000 at hiring a politician or a celebrity speaker or something like that, oftentimes that's just the move that gets done. And I know that as a keynote curator, you've probably seen this plenty of times where you go, yeah, I could get that guy for it. I don't think it's gonna be a home run for you. I think that you could do these 2 or 3 other things, save 90% of that budget, and still have a better event. And I think that I've definitely been a part of events where I can tell they thought this person was going to save the event, or they thought this person was going to do their whole job for them. And then I've been at other events where they go, we don't have that budget, and they're scrimping and saving, but you can tell they have paid attention to every single part of the customer experience, and they've thought through, what is the check-in process like? And how do we make that more convenient? And how can we inject little bits of surprise and delight and joy and fun? How can we ask at every point, do we have to do this thing? Do we need this? Is this necessary to the experience? Or is this just a thing that we're doing because we've done it forever? And you go to some of those events and you're just like, this is so much fun. This is so creative, so innovative. And they didn't go, oh, well, we brought in whoever, we spent
Right.
all this money to bring in this rock band or this experience or whatever. And so those are the events that get me fired up, because I'm always going, oh, these people care. And there's
Right.
no correlation for me. There's no direct correlation between big budget, big event and good event. That's not equal
Yeah.
sign, right?
Right.
Sometimes great events have huge budgets. And sometimes you go to an event and you're like, they spent a lot of money and they wasted most of it.
And what I think gets transmitted on a subliminal level or a subconscious level, I'm not a psychologist, is not only did you feel like they thought it through, but the simplicity of it. There's an occurrence that it was so simple, but so potent that it wasn't a big spend. It wasn't an over complex execution. And my gosh, I can't there's a fresh energy to it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think there's something about creativity where it looks obvious in hindsight and you go, oh, of course, this is the only way it ever could have been. But it took so much work to get to that part. That's what Apple has always been so good at this thing where once you see a new Apple product, not all the time, but most of the time, you're like, oh yeah, why didn't we do this in the first place? But it took so much time and attention to detail to ask at every step of the way, do we need this? How can we make it better? What is frustrating about this? Where are the friction points? How do we remove those things? And I think that we don't always realize that we can take those same tools and apply them to anything. We can apply them to the check-in process. We can apply them to registration. We can apply them to, whatever it is, booking speakers, booking entertainment, the agenda layout, all of those different things to go, what do people hate about this? Or what is friction here? What are people frustrated by? How do we remove that? What delights people? And how can we put more of that into the program? Not as just an afterthought to, like you said, oh, let's bring in a juggler. Okay, fine, great. Do that if that is what is genuinely delighting your people. But if that's just, well, we got to make them happy, so we'll throw this entertaining thing at the end. What if we asked, how do we make sure that every step of the way they're delighted? That every 15, 20 minutes or every hour or a couple times a day, we're injecting little bits of surprise and delight and joy into that experience and these aha moments, and not just tacking that on at the end. How do we infuse that in? Those are questions that we can all ask about, whether we're event planners, running a company, whatever you're doing. Asking those questions is how the creative process moves forward.
Yeah, for our listeners, that is just such rich gold. Those are insights, tips, and really a pathway and a guideline, if you will, real guidance on generating creative mindset, if you will. Kyle, you're a keynote speaker, you're a father, you're a husband, you're a busy man, and the patron saint of big ideas. I don't know your background, what your heritage is, but how did you become the Viking connected with funerals and regrets and, this crazy idea? But before you land that plane, I want you to connect it all in here. And I'm just going to throw you here. I'm going to put the creativity at work here. I'm going to make you do the work. You touch on kindness and empathy for creating healthy work environments. And you created this incredible Viking funeral for regrets. And, I recall you sharing that the day after the Viking funeral, that you were really moved. You were moved to tears. It was emotional for you. How people had really identified, as much of a crazy, big, fun, audacious idea it was, that people really plugged in on an authentic level, and they put to bed regrets. They said goodbye. They completed things that were open wounds or unfinished business, things that were incompleteness in their life. And, you kind of taken that forward with kindness and empathy. Land that plane for me.
Yeah. So, I think this is a great example of a lot of the stuff we've been talking about constraints, but also about the creative process. I think that oftentimes one of the things that I like to do as an artist is to sort of pull the curtain back and show people what the creative process is and how it works and how messy it is and how indirect it is. Because I think oftentimes people see a finished product and they go, oh my gosh, I could never make that. And they don't see how jaggedy and curvy and weird the path was to get from point A to point B. And so the project that you're talking about started 8 years ago when I was about to turn 30 years old. I'm 38 now. And so when I was about to turn 30, I was trying to think like, okay, this is a big, this is the birthday that ends in a zero. You only get a few of these in your lifetime. Like, what should I do to celebrate this? And how can I make this a big thing? And I was sort of joking around that, I don't really want to have a party to celebrate turning 30. Like, I want to have a funeral for the death of my 20s. And then I was like, well, that's kind of morbid. And my mom was like, that's weird. What, are you going to have a coffin and have people give your gifts in the coffin? Like, and I was like, no. Like, I'll do a Viking funeral. And it just started as a joke. And I was like, oh, and I've done a lot of art with cardboard in the past. And so I was like, I could build a big Viking ship out of cardboard and put some big letters and numbers inside to say, my 20s or whatever. And then I could set the whole thing on fire. That's what you do with the Viking funeral. You set a ship on fire.
Cardboard is the preferred material of elementary school artists. So just so that
that's true. That's true. And it also burns really well. So I did that. And that was all that idea was ever supposed to be, was a dumb birthday party. And then some friends of mine came and interviewed me. They're a videography and video production company. And they were like, hey, let us make a little like 3-minute mini documentary about this. And so they interviewed me and we made this thing. And in that interview, they asked me, are you going to be sad to burn this thing that you've worked so hard on? Because it was 8 feet tall. It was 16 feet long and it was very ornate. It had like thousands of little scales that were glued on. And I said, no, you have to let go.
It was a dragon, right? It was a dragon.
Yeah, it was a Viking dragon boat and had a head and a tail. And it was like, there's pictures of it online. I think that when people think of a Viking ship or of a cardboard dragon ship, they think it's going to be very crude. It was very ornate and I worked really hard on it. And so my friends asked me, are you going to be sad to burn this thing? And I said, no, you have to let go of the past to make room for things in the future. And somehow that part of the video just like seemed to really impact people. When it went out on the internet and it started getting shared and spread. And I started getting emails from people saying, man, your weird birthday party thing kind of like made me tear up, or it impacted me in some way. And you know what? I've got some stuff I want to let go of. I've got some stuff I want to put in the past. And then they would always say at the end of their email, they'd be like, just wish I could do it with a cool Viking funeral. And so I got one of these emails, and then I got 2 of these emails, and then I got a dozen of these emails. And I was like, a year later, I'm still getting these emails. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. Like, all these people are saying the same thing, and they're all saying, I've got stuff I want to let go of. I just, I wish I had a Viking funeral. So I thought, okay, well, maybe if that would make it easier, let's do one more. And so I just asked people, write down the thing that you want to let go of and send it to me, and I'll put it in a Viking ship and set it on fire. And again, that was never what it started as a birthday party. And then the other people brought their thoughts and desires to this. And I was, okay, well then that shaped the whole outcome. And then I ended up, it was so much bigger of a success than I ever thought. I was trying, like, my goal was, man, wouldn't it be cool if I could get 10,000 regrets? And I got over 21,000 regrets. And they came in multiple different languages, shipped in from all over the world. There were, sometimes I would get one note card with a regret on it. And sometimes I would get a package of like 100 or 1,000, like a whole school would do it together, or like a fraternity, or a whole dorm room, or like an Alcoholics Anonymous group. Like, there were all of these different things. And then I built, the second ship was 16 feet tall. It was 30 feet long. It was this massive thing. And then I put all the regrets into that, and I had a Viking funeral for the people that we used to be, right? Like, I don't want to be this person anymore. That's who I used to be. I'm trying to lay that person to rest so I can become the person I'm meant to be. And people tuned in from all over the world to watch the live stream of this. And it was just this really profound moment. The project, there was all these ups and downs. I wrote all about this in the book. But it took longer than I thought. It was harder than I thought. I wanted to give up so many times. But in that moment, like when the ship started to burn, that's when I just broke down. I just was like, all of these emotions. And then in the comments, while people were watching the live stream, there were all these people who had never met before who connected over this project. And they were all talking about how ever since they sent in their regret, they had been waiting for this moment, and they've been waiting to watch this whole thing go up. And it was so cool. At one point, somebody wrote, to moving on. And then someone else wrote, to moving on. It became this like this cheer that was just like all these people filling up the chat with this thing. And it was just really, it was a really, really cool experience. And
Yeah.
this thing that was, ultimately symbolic, like putting a note card in a ship doesn't make your problems go away, but it did really seem to have real meaning and significance for thousands of people all over the world.
Yeah, and they had the experience of putting the past in the past, and like you said, you do that, you make room for new things, you make room for a new future, new possibilities, and I think at the heart of it, that's what people were really tuning into.
Yeah.
That having that experience, and I can imagine that must have been something that really woke you up to the power of this bold and audacious idea.
Yeah. And I
You
think it
know,
just showed me once again that you never know where your ideas are going to land, and that's been a
yeah,
theme in my work over and over and over again. And I'm always on stage talking to people about you have no idea what's possible for your life. And I have no idea what's possible for your life or for my life or for anyone else's. Like so many times I'll go after a project and I'll think, okay, best case scenario will land here and worst case scenario will land here. And we almost never land anywhere in that window that I thought. It's always way better than I thought, or way worse than I thought, or just it'll land somewhere that's completely outside of where I could have ever imagined. And so I always think, man, you should just try it because you never know. And when you chase your crazy ideas, like this thing that started out as this silly, honestly, kind of self-indulgent birthday party, like, oh, let me do this big dumb Viking funeral for my 20s, became this thing that was able to provide, meaning and comfort and a moment for people all over the world. And I would have never envisioned that. And I would imagine there are people who will watch this and they think, oh, I've got this little idea and man, it'll probably never be anything. It will definitely never be anything if that's what it stays. But if you pull it out and actually have the courage and the boldness to go, I'm going to try this thing, you have
yeah,
no idea where that thing could land.
yeah. For our listeners, our subscribers, our audience, our viewers, we're going to put that video in the show notes because it's just incredible. You'll be able to check it out on our website at thekeynotecurators.com. And, Kyle on his speaker profile, where you can find more information about him and his keynotes and how we can bring him to your event. These are incredible insights. And, if you're enjoying this conversation on leadership and creativity and being bold and having empathy and understanding people and creating new possibilities, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, check us out on social media channels, turn on the notifications and stay inspired for more insights like this one. I will say this, Kyle, you have really touched on some of the common themes on the podcast, and the podcast itself being something me, the team, and there's a lot of team behind this. It was an idea and we just said, let's do it. And I'm taking it from another speaker, dare to suck, go out there. And I just started cutting my teeth and the
Wow.
transformation, the growth, the impact. And as I go to events, I've gotten comments like, do I know you? And it's not about me. They're like, oh yeah, in that episode where Kyle, and he was talking about the Viking funeral. And you never know. So that's been a common theme of dare to suck, get started, even if it's not 100% baked, and you never know the impact it's going to have, right? And the idea
Exactly.
is just to be in action. So
Yeah.
I think that your story and your core virtues of your keynote and your message are really consistent with our through line that we have here. You've mentioned how this has had a shift in perspective for others where they've really connected. I want to look at it the other way. What has been an event, a moment, either recently or something important, where that's happened for you, where you've had an experience at a keynote or an event like a Viking funeral or something where your perspective has shifted?
Honestly, you and I were talking just briefly before we started recording about my history. Before I was in the corporate speaking market, I was a youth speaker for like 12 years. And I went around and did hundreds of school assemblies and leadership keynotes for high school kids and talked to them. And I think that because of that, like the youth market can feel sort of like the minor leagues compared to the corporate market. Like this feels like, oh, this is where all the real speakers are. And I, for the longest time, just thought, oh, I don't know if I'll be able to hang at that level. And then I came in, like I did my first corporate event and it went so much better than I ever imagined. And the first person that came up to me afterwards was like, "Hey, we want to book you for an event." And that has just continued to happen over and over again. And I realized, oh, like I had all of these thoughts about why it won't work, or the competition's going to be too intense, or I'm not going to be good enough, or whatever. And I had not really taken the time to think about, well, what if I am capable? What if I can hang at that level? My friend Michelle Poehler, who's another amazing speaker, she talks about her therapist telling her to, we always think about what's the worst thing that could happen, and we start planning for that. But we never ask what's the best thing that could happen. And we never ask, like, what if actually, like, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be? And so the last few years have just been this insane rocket ship journey into the corporate world. When people ask me, like, how has that been for you, and what's that like, and what are your thoughts? I'm like, I kind of just wish I would have started earlier, because I had all of these. I had talked myself out of why now wasn't the right time, or I wasn't ready, or whatever. And then I came in and none of that stuff turned out to be true. And one of the things that I tell people all the time is that we as a culture and as a society, and even as individuals, we have a very deep bench of talent when it comes to people who will tell you why your idea won't work, and devil's
Right.
advocates. And like, there are plenty of people out there. We don't need any more of those. So if that's
There's
what you think you're good at.
There's no scarcity of the no in the world.
Yeah. Oh, we have plenty of critics, but what we don't have is a lot of people who will bodyguard an idea for someone else. And I'm not saying that you have to go around and tell everyone that all their ideas will work. But I do think sometimes all it takes is one person saying, like, "Hey, I don't know, but maybe you should just give it a shot. I don't know if it'll succeed or fail. It might be a terrible failure, but it also might go way better than you ever imagined. And the only way you're going to find that out is by trying it." And sometimes
Right.
that's all it takes for
Right.
someone to have the courage to actually push that idea out into the world.
Yeah. Said in a very metaphorical, esoteric way, how do you know what an apple tastes like? You have to take a bite.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming to the end here. We could go on. And I just want to leave on this note, because you touched so many lives, whether it was the youth audiences, the corporate audiences, events, in business, in life. Just leave us with some of the simple ways that we can show appreciation and we can make people feel valued, in your view.
I think just feeling valued as a person, in my experience, comes down to feeling seen, and feeling like not that I see Seth in a crowd of people, but that I just see Seth, that I just see you, and that I want to connect with you and I want to learn about your story. That's so much of life. When I was traveling around the youth world for so long, my message was talking about the power of one person to make a difference. And I used to think that message only was really for high school kids. And then I've been asked to give that talk in the corporate world, and people will cry. And because the whole talk boils down to, you can't control what happens to you. You can't control, there's so many things outside of your control. How the world works, what happens with, we saw this in the pandemic, or with politics, or whatever the thing is. There's so many things outside of your control, and it can make you feel like, I don't have any control over anything. But if you look back in your own life, almost all of the biggest moments have been when one person noticed you, and when one person took the time to just connect with you. It only takes one person to make someone feel like they matter. It also only takes one person to make someone feel like they don't. It only takes one person you can totally make someone's day.
Yeah.
Just one person, regardless of what other things are happening. And you can also totally ruin someone's day with just one person. And I would always end my talks by saying, like, it takes one person to do any of those things. And you're in luck, because I just checked, and it just so happens that one person is exactly what you have to work with.
Yeah, that's great. And it doesn't take a ton of time to do it.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
it
can
does.
do it.
We can think of all these reasons why I don't have the time or the capital to start this business, or to fund this charity, to do these big, huge things. But most of the big things in my life have been just when one person said, "Hey, are you okay? It looks like you're having a rough day. Hey, do you want to talk?
Right.
Hey, do you want to go grab a cup of coffee?" Things that cost almost nothing, or do actually cost nothing. They only cost you putting yourself out there and being willing to make that connection.
Yeah. You don't have to do a moonshot of acknowledgement. It just could be one, one small step for man, right? It doesn't have to be this huge, huge gesture. Well, Kyle, I want to acknowledge and thank you for the work you do and the lives that you've impacted, and also for taking the lid off and opening up the creative spirit in people that see your keynotes, or people that you just interact with every day. I truly do believe we all are artists, even if it is the most unsexy, boring, conventional profession or activity. There is creativity in every action, every possibility, every communication, every connection. And thank you for being that patron saint for everybody in the world, holding the light, showing us the way. For all of those artists that have yet to be touched by Kyle, I want to thank you in the future for touching them. It's appreciated. And I know some are going to be, no, I'm not. And you have that artful, beautiful, creative way of getting in there and unlocking that. So just thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a privilege.
And you're welcome. And for all of us that are here as subscribers and listeners and viewers and return subscribers and those that are here for the first time, just thanks for joining us today. If you found this discussion on creativity and leadership helpful, insightful, impactful, don't miss our other episodes where we explore these themes in even deeper levels. And share it with someone you love, share it with someone you like, share it with someone you kind of love and like. We loved having you here today, and we will see you next time.